It was one of those mornings that felt like any other, until I walked into the lobby. The air was thick with tension, a sense of something impending, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I had just stepped out of the car and into the glass-walled building that I had only heard about in whispers, an office that housed some of the most powerful people in the city. And I was about to join them. I was dressed in a tailored suit, my black leather shoes shining under the early morning sun. My presence in this building should have been a natural thing, after all, I was the one they had been waiting for. But when I walked toward the entrance, the security guard at the door stopped me. "Excuse me, sir," he said, his voice casual, but with an undertone of suspicion. "Can I see your ID? Are you expected?" I raised an eyebrow, a small smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. "I'm expected," I said, and reached for my badge. But the guard didn't seem convinced. He gave me a quick once-over, his eyes lingering a little too long on my face, then hesitated. "I'm not sure I've seen you before. You might want to check in with the front desk." I nodded, but I wasn't about to let him dictate my every move. I wasn't just any man off the street, I was the new CEO. I walked past him without another word, ignoring his lingering gaze as I approached the front desk. The receptionist looked up from her computer screen, and I could see the flicker of surprise in her eyes when she caught sight of me. She didn't expect someone like me, dressed in a sharp, professional suit, entering through those doors. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice polite but clearly unsure. "I'm here to meet with Mr. Taylor," I said, keeping my tone steady and calm. "I'm the new CEO." Her eyes widened, and for a moment, she hesitated, glancing at the security camera above her desk before typing something into her computer. The seconds dragged on like hours, the tension rising with every tick of the clock. Finally, she gave me a tight-lipped smile, her fingers tapping rapidly on the keys. "Ah, yes. Mr. Taylor is expecting you," she said, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "Please, head to the elevator, and the 12th floor will be your destination." I nodded, walking toward the elevator as her eyes followed me. The air felt dense, thick with the feeling that something wasn't quite right. But I was determined to let nothing stand in my way, not today. I pressed the button for the elevator, and as the doors opened, I couldn't help but wonder just how many assumptions had been made about me in the few seconds since I'd entered the building. I stepped inside, the doors closing behind me, the hum of the elevator filling the silence. The city outside moved in a blur as the elevator ascended, but I had one thing on my mind, showing them exactly who I was and what I could do. The deal I had brokered, the one that had been valued at $10 million, wasn't just a footnote in my career. It was my statement. And I was about to make it clear. The elevator dinged, and the doors slid open, revealing a sleek, modern floor with glass walls that overlooked the city below. The corporate energy was palpable, people moving about in their tailored suits, clicking away on their laptops, phones pressed to their ears, immersed in a world that felt like the fast track to success. But as I stepped out, something caught my attention. A couple of executives in the hallway glanced up from their discussions and exchanged looks. One of them raised an eyebrow, and the other seemed to stifle a laugh. I could feel their stares on me, and for a brief moment, a rush of doubt crept in. Maybe they weren't aware of who I was, despite the briefings and meetings that had happened behind closed doors. Maybe they had made assumptions, based on the way I looked, just like the guard at the door had. But that doubt quickly vanished as I walked towards the large glass office doors at the end of the hallway. As soon as I reached them, I saw Mr. Taylor standing by the window, talking to a few people. He turned around when he saw me. "Ah, you must be," he paused, scanning me quickly from head to toe before extending his hand. "Welcome. I didn't expect you this early." His handshake was firm, but there was something behind his eyes, an almost imperceptible hesitation. I could tell he hadn't quite connected the dots yet. Most of the people in the room had no idea who I was, or how much power I held in my hands. But that was about to change. "I wanted to get started right away," I said, flashing a confident smile. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "Oh, not at all," he said, stepping aside as the others shuffled out of the room. "We're all set for the presentation. I'll just let everyone know you've arrived. Please, make yourself comfortable." As the door closed behind the last person, I stood there for a moment, scanning the sleek office, a perfect reflection of the kind of world they thought they knew. But what they didn't know was that everything was about to shift. I wasn't just here to play the game, I was here to change it. And that $10 million deal? That was only the beginning. I sat at the sleek glass conference table, the room bathed in the natural light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The view of the city was impressive, but it did little to distract me from the task at hand. I could hear footsteps echoing in the hallway as the team trickled in one by one, exchanging glances with each other, unsure of who exactly I was. I could feel their eyes on me as I adjusted my tie, a calculated move that made them take another second to size me up. None of them had figured it out yet. I had noticed the subtle way they whispered to one another when I entered, their eyes scanning over me as if they weren't entirely convinced that someone like me belonged in this space. It wasn't just the suit. It wasn't even the way I carried myself. It was something deeper. The last person to enter was Mr. Taylor. He cleared his throat as he stood at the head of the table, facing the group, and then turned toward me. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice booming in the room. "This is Mr. Jameson. He is..." Before he could finish his sentence, I stood up, cutting him off in the most deliberate way possible. I had no interest in waiting for him to label me. It wasn't his place anymore. "Actually," I said, meeting everyone's eyes, "I'm the new CEO." The room went dead silent. Their faces froze. The usual corporate smiles evaporated, replaced by looks of disbelief. Mr. Taylor seemed taken aback, caught mid-thought. His hand hovered awkwardly above the papers in front of him, his face a mixture of confusion and embarrassment. You're the CEO?" he stammered. "Yes," I replied calmly, letting the words settle. "And I'll be overseeing every aspect of the deal from here on out." I could see the shift in their expressions. Some of them glanced at each other, unsure whether to question me or hold their tongues. Others, however, were already backpedaling in their minds, recalculating how they could spin this revelation in their favor. I could almost hear their thoughts. What does this mean for the $10 million deal? How did this happen? I could feel the subtle change in the atmosphere, the shift from initial confusion to realization. They had all underestimated me. The man who had walked through the door only minutes ago wasn't just some outsider. They had just been handed a reminder that things weren't always as simple as they seemed. And the deal? It was about to go through just fine. If anything, this was only the beginning of showing them what I was capable of. The tension in the room was palpable as I sat back down at the conference table. Everyone was still processing the news, but I could tell the power dynamics had already shifted. I let the silence linger, watching their faces carefully, studying the reactions as they tried to recalibrate their assumptions about me. Finally, Mr. Taylor broke the silence. "So, you're the new CEO? This is unexpected." I didn't respond immediately. I didn't need to. Instead, I reached for the folder in front of me, opening it slowly and deliberately. I could hear the rustle of papers as I flipped through the documents, and I could feel their eyes on me, some skeptical, others already calculating how to move forward in the wake of the surprise. "Let me make this clear," I began, my voice steady, even. "The $10 million deal you've been working on. It's still happening. I've already reviewed the proposal and approved the terms. I've been overseeing everything from behind the scenes, and now, I'm here to take the reins." There was a moment of stunned silence before one of the younger executives, a man in his late 20s, spoke up. "But Mr. Taylor has been managing this deal for months. Are you saying we're just supposed to switch everything over to you without?" I raised my hand slightly, cutting him off. "No one's asking for a switch. You'll keep doing what you've been doing. But now, you'll do it under my leadership." My eyes locked on his, letting the weight of the situation settle over him. It's not about changing what's been done, it's about ensuring that what's next is executed perfectly. I glanced around the room again, meeting the eyes of each person in turn. I understand change can be unsettling. But if there's one thing you'll learn about me, it's that I don't make decisions on a whim. This is what's best for the company and the deal. Mr. Taylor, visibly uncomfortable but trying to maintain control, shifted in his chair. Jameson, this is a lot for everyone to digest. We weren't prepared for this today. That's the thing about business, I said, offering a slight smile. You're never fully prepared. You adapt, or you lose. The weight of my words hit the room like a sudden gust of wind. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was reflective, as if they were all quietly reconsidering what they thought they knew about power, success, and who deserved to hold the reins. I stood up again, signaling that it was time to move forward. Now, let's get back to work. I have a meeting with the board in an hour, and I expect all of you to be on your game. We've got a $10 million deal to close, and I'm not in the business of failure. As I turned to leave, I saw the looks in their eyes shift once more. They weren't just trying to figure out who I was anymore. They were thinking about how they could stay on my good side. Because they knew I was in charge now. And the game was about to change for good. As I walked out of the conference room, the murmur of voices followed me like a ripple across water. The chatter wasn't about the deal anymore, it was about me. About how I had just walked in and turned their world upside down in less than an hour. I didn't let it faze me. In fact, I relished the power in those moments. The uncertainty I had witnessed in their eyes only fueled my resolve. This was the moment where they learned that being underestimated was a dangerous mistake. And I was more than ready to prove them wrong. I passed the lobby on my way out, but this time, I didn't see the same receptionist at the desk. Instead, a different woman, one who appeared far more confident and composed, was working. She glanced up as I walked past, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice sharp but polite, "are you looking for someone?" I stopped in my tracks, turning toward her, a smile tugging at the corner of my lips. "No," I replied, my tone cool and casual. "I'm just heading out." She hesitated for a moment, clearly unsure of whether she should offer any more information. But I knew what she was thinking, this was the new CEO. The one who had just barged in and took over. Before she could speak again, I added, "You can tell Mr. Taylor I'll be in touch soon. I'll need an updated report on all the developments by the end of the day." Her eyes widened ever so slightly. But instead of saying anything, she simply nodded, acknowledging my authority without a word. I stepped out of the building, and as the glass doors closed behind me, I felt the weight of the city around me, its skyline, its energy, its pulse. I wasn't just another cog in the machine anymore. I had become the one pulling the strings. And as I walked down the street, heading toward my car, I couldn't help but think about the looks I had gotten inside. The surprise. The disbelief. But most importantly, the shift in how they saw me now. I wasn't just some outsider walking in, I was their new reality. The $10 million deal. That was just the beginning. What came next would change everything. The next few days flew by in a blur of meetings, conference calls, and strategy sessions. As the new CEO, I had to immerse myself fully into the operations of the company, but there was something deeper going on than just business as usual. The people who once doubted me, the ones who were uncomfortable with my sudden presence, were now scrambling to align themselves with me, to prove their worth. It didn't escape my notice that the whispers had stopped. There was no longer any hesitation in the way people interacted with me. Now, I was greeted with nods of respect, and their actions were more calculated, more thoughtful. The board members who once questioned my qualifications now sought my approval on every decision, as if they were desperate to make sure they didn't make another misstep. I could feel the shift in the atmosphere whenever I walked into a room. Gone were the stares, the doubting glances, the half-hearted attempts at pretending to be on board. Everyone understood now that I wasn't just a figurehead. I was in control. The respect I commanded was tangible, the weight of my presence heavier with each passing day. But it wasn't just about proving myself. It was about executing the plan I had been crafting long before I even stepped foot in this office. I had already been assessing the company from the inside out, figuring out where the weaknesses were, where the opportunities lay, and how to take advantage of them. The $10 million deal. That was already a done deal. But that wasn't what I was here for. That was just the surface. The real challenge was reshaping the company into something even more formidable, making strategic moves that no one saw coming. The kind of moves that would not only solidify my position but guarantee long-term dominance in the industry. I sat in my office one morning, reviewing reports when the door to my office opened. It was Mr. Taylor, looking a little more flustered than usual, his hands stuffed in his pockets. He looked as if he had been rehearsing what to say but couldn't quite get the words right. "Jameson," he began, nervously clearing his throat. "I wanted to check in and see how you're feeling about things. We've made a lot of progress, but, well, I wanted to make sure everything is going according to plan." I didn't look up from the papers in front of me, taking my time to process the question. I knew exactly what he was asking. He was checking to see if I was still satisfied with the progress, or if I was considering making changes. His attempt to manage the situation was obvious, but I didn't mind. It wasn't a surprise that he felt the need to check in. After all, he had been the one running the show before I arrived. "Mr. Taylor," I said, finally lifting my gaze and locking eyes with him. "I'm pleased with the progress. But you need to understand something. This isn't just about the numbers. It's about vision. And right now, the vision needs to shift. I'll need everyone on board with that." He nodded slowly, his gaze shifting from mine as if he was still processing my words. "I understand. But, any specifics on where you'd like to see those changes?" I leaned back in my chair, the silence stretching between us as I considered my next words. "I'm focusing on leadership, Mr. Taylor. Your team needs to be restructured. People are too comfortable. I want them to feel like they have to earn their place. There's too much complacency, and complacency breeds failure. I'm not here to let that happen." His eyes widened slightly, but I could tell he wasn't surprised. He had seen the shift already, and now he was starting to understand the depth of my vision. "We'll get it done," he said finally, his tone more resigned than anything else. "I'll start looking into the changes you need." "Good," I said, my voice firm. "We'll talk again in a few days. And make sure everyone is aligned." As he left the room, I couldn't help but smile to myself. The real work was just beginning. What they didn't realize yet was that the restructuring I had planned would set the stage for something far bigger than they could ever imagine. This company wasn't just going to succeed, it was going to dominate. And with me at the helm, that was a guarantee. And soon, they'd all see the kind of CEO they had underestimated. The following weeks were a whirlwind of changes, some subtle, others impossible to ignore. I had begun to implement my strategy, the one that would shake things up at every level. Slowly but surely, I reshaped the team, pushing the people around me to rise to the occasion, to meet the expectations I had set. Those who thrived under pressure were rewarded with more responsibility. Those who faltered, well, they found themselves on the outside looking in. Mr. Taylor, while initially hesitant, had come to understand that this wasn't a power play. It was about survival. The corporate world was unforgiving, and I had no intention of being swept under the rug. I was going to ensure that the company not only weathered the storm but emerged as a leader in the industry. But it wasn't just the employees who were affected by the shift in power. Word about my leadership had spread quickly. Other companies were beginning to take notice. Our competitors were worried, and clients, especially the big ones, had started to send requests for meetings, eager to see if the rumors were true. I sat in my office one afternoon, reviewing the numbers, when I received a call. It was from one of the investors I had been in talks with. a seasoned player in the industry who had been quietly watching from the sidelines. "Jameson," he said, his voice low and deliberate, "I've been hearing a lot about the changes you've been making. People are impressed." I leaned back in my chair, casually flipping through a report, though my attention was fully on the conversation. "Impressed is good," I replied. "But it's not enough. I need action. I need results." There was a pause on the other end of the line before he responded, his voice a little more guarded now. "You're moving fast. Too fast for some people. There's talk of dissatisfaction among some of your team members. They're worried about the new direction." I chuckled softly, the sound almost cold. "Let them worry. The ones who can't keep up will be left behind. This is about progress, not comfort. If they can't handle it, they can walk." There was another silence, and I could almost hear the investor processing my words. Finally, he spoke again, this time with a hint of admiration in his tone. "You're playing a dangerous game, but you're doing it with style. I'll tell you this, Jameson, if you keep up the pace, you'll have our full backing for the next phase." I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. "That's exactly what I want to hear." We ended the call, and I sat back in my chair, staring out at the city below. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the skyline. It felt symbolic. Things were changing, but the horizon was bright. And I was leading the charge. The restructuring was nearly complete. A few more weeks, and everything would be in place. I had seen the future, and it was one where my vision reigned supreme. My presence in the company was no longer a curiosity, it was a force. And those who doubted me were quickly realizing their mistake. But there was still work to be done. There were still deals to close, new projects to kick off, and a board to convince. The real test was yet to come. But I wasn't worried. Not anymore. The company was on the cusp of something great, and I was the one who would take it there. As I walked out of my office, I passed a group of executives gathered near the break room. They turned to look at me as I passed, their expressions a mix of respect and wariness. Some of them had been the ones who doubted me from the start, the ones who had questioned my ability to lead. Now, they watched me with a new understanding, realizing just how wrong they had been. I gave them a brief nod, then stepped into the elevator. As the doors closed behind me, I let out a slow breath. This was just the beginning. And the next phase? It would make the $10 million deal look like a drop in the ocean. A month had passed since I stepped into the role of CEO, and the transformation I had set into motion was undeniable. The company was now operating with a renewed sense of purpose and drive. The weak links had been eliminated, and the strongest had flourished under my leadership. The $10 million deal I had orchestrated was only the start, what I had planned was far more ambitious. Investors were lining up, eager to get in on the next wave of projects I was pushing forward. I had turned the company's reputation around in record time, and the financial backing was rolling in faster than anticipated. As I entered the boardroom for the final presentation of the fiscal year, I could feel the anticipation in the air. The same people who had once questioned my decisions now stood ready to applaud them. They had no choice but to respect the results. Mr. Taylor, who had adapted far quicker than I expected, stood up as I entered. He had become one of my strongest allies, though I could tell, deep down, he still felt the sting of having been sidelined in the company's future. But now, he knew better than to question my authority. "Jameson," he said with a grin, his voice filled with more admiration than it had been a month ago, "everything you've done, it's working. The projections for next quarter are looking better than we imagined." I didn't say anything at first. I simply took my seat at the head of the table, letting the silence stretch as I glanced at the numbers on the screen. The room had grown quieter. There was an almost reverent quality to the way they looked at me now. No longer was I just the newcomer. I was the force that had pulled them out of stagnation and set them on a trajectory they couldn't have dreamed of on their own. "Let's talk about the next steps," I said, my voice calm but resolute. "The groundwork has been laid. Now it's time to make our next big move. I tapped the folder in front of me, signaling that the decisions we'd been working toward for weeks were about to come to fruition. The investors I'd been speaking to were already in place, ready to back the next big venture. Our market share would increase exponentially, and with the new acquisitions on the horizon, we were poised to dominate the industry in ways no one saw coming. I glanced around the room, seeing the expressions of the executives, the ones who had doubted, the ones who had thought they could hold on to their positions by sticking to the old ways. And now they knew, there was no going back. What you all need to understand, I continued, is that this company won't just be successful. It will redefine the market. I'm not here to play catch-up. I'm here to lead, and that means making bold decisions. I expect each of you to bring your best to the table, because we are about to make history. There was a hushed agreement in the room, and I could feel the energy shift once more. Now, they were truly with me, not because they had no other choice, but because they could see it too. The future I had promised them was real. It was happening. As I looked at the faces around the table, those who had once questioned my place here, I knew they would follow. They had no choice but to follow, because I had already shown them what was possible under my leadership. I had proven that the impossible was within reach. The deal, the transformation, the power, it was all mine. And as I walked out of the boardroom for the final time that day, I knew I had done exactly what I set out to do. I wasn't just the new CEO anymore. I was the one who had changed everything. And the world was finally starting to see it.